When people talk Mopar, the conversation always ends up circling back to the same names. The 426 Hemi, the 440 Magnum, the 6.2 Hellcat. These are the giants, the poster boys. But here's the thing, not every Mopar legend came with a loud reputation. Some were quiet workhorses, others were overlooked masterpieces, and a few were just too early or too different for people to understand at the time. This one's for the underdogs, the motors that didn't make the magazine covers but still earned their stripes, the ones that powered daily drivers, survived long hauls, and sometimes, just sometimes, went toe-to-toe with the greats. These are the 10 most underrated Mopar engines ever built, starting with a few you probably haven't thought about in years. In 10th place, the 3.9 Magnum V6. Let's just get this out of the way. Yeah, it's a V6, and no, it wasn't built to break speed records, but the 3.9 had one job, and it nailed it. Keep moving, based off the same architecture as the LA small blocks, specifically the 318. It was tough, simple, and surprisingly reliable. You'd find it under the hood of Dakotas, early Durangos, base Rams, and even cargo vans. It didn't roar, but it ran. You could abuse it, ignore it, redline it, and it just wouldn't quit. That's why it kicks off this list, because sometimes being unstoppable is more impressive than being fast. In 9th, the 361B block. Now we're talking full-size iron. Born in the late 50s, the 361 was the B-engine family's middle child, wedged right between the more famous 383 and the towering 440. It was quieter, less powerful, and largely forgotten, but this thing had torque, smooth power delivery, and a cast iron backbone that made it ideal for big family cars, police cruisers, and fleet vehicles. It wasn't flashy, but it moved America in the 60s, and with a little tuning, it had enough grunt to surprise anyone who dared to underestimate it. 8th place goes to the 2.2 turbo 4-cylinder. That's right, a Turbo 4 on a Mopar list. If you weren't around in the 80s, you might have missed the chaos. Chrysler was under pressure, the V8 era was choking on emissions, and buyers wanted speed on a budget. So what did they do? They went turbo crazy, and at the heart of it all was this 2.2-liter inline 4, shoved into everything from the Shelby Charger to the Omni GLH, which literally stood for goes like hell. These things were fast, affordable, and just a little bit unhinged. You could roast V8s from red lights in a front-wheel drive Econobox that looked like your aunt's commuter. Say what you want, the 2.2 turbo made Mopar dangerous again when they needed it most. In 7th, the 400 cubic inch big block. This one's a bit of a redemption arc. The 400 was Chrysler's last true B-Series big block, introduced in the early 70s during the muscle car crash. By that time, compression ratios were dropping, emissions rules were squeezing the life out of everything, and performance numbers looked more like grocery receipts. The 400 got stuffed into big cars, choked by smog equipment, and written off as a dud. But here's the twist. The block itself was a hidden gem. Huge bore, thick cylinder walls. Tuners realized you could bolt on 440 heads, rework the cam, and suddenly, this forgotten lump was putting down serious power. Quiet on paper, brutal in practice. The 400 was Mopar's late bloomer. And in 6th place, the 273 LA V8. If there's one engine that deserves more credit for changing the game, it's this one. The 273 was the very first LA Series small block, launched in 1964, and it laid the groundwork for legends like the 318, the 340, and the 360. It was light, responsive, and ahead of its time. While the competition was still pushing big, heavy V8s, Chrysler showed the world they could make something compact, nimble, and efficient without sacrificing character. It didn't win drag races, but it didn't have to. It proved that performance wasn't just about displacement, it was about design. Without the 273, the entire LA family doesn't exist. And now we're halfway through. That's 5 down. 5 more to go. But the top 5, that's where the real surprises live. Hidden powerhouses, international killers, small blocks that swung way above their weight class. These next 5 engines aren't just underrated, they're downright disrespected. But by the time we're done, you'll never look at Mopar the same way again. We're down to the final 5, and now it's time to talk about the ones that got done dirty, the engines that could have been legends if only someone had given them a proper chance. Some of these were ahead of their time, some got overshadowed, and some were just flat out better than people gave them credit for. In 5th place, the 360 Magnum. This motor came at a weird time, right before the Hemi comeback, back when Dodge was still finding its identity. It was a revamped version of the LA small block, but with modern upgrades. Roller cam, better flowing heads, a serious bump in torque. This wasn't some weak leftover. It was a bruiser in disguise. You'd find it in Ram trucks, Grand Cherokees, and even some performance builds in the late 90s. It had low-end grunt, solid reliability, and a nasty sound when you uncorked it. The 360 Magnum didn't get the hype, but it kept the fire lit until the Gen 3 HEMIs showed up. In 4th, the 413 RB Big Block. And before the 426 ruled the tracks, there was this, the 413. Born in the late 50s, this motor came straight from the factory with brute strength. It was used in everything from Chrysler 300 letter cars to heavy-duty trucks. On the drag strip, it laid the foundation for what would become the Max Wedge movement. On the street, it hauled luxury land yachts with zero hesitation. Nobody talks about it anymore, but back in the day, this was Chrysler's go-to for big displacement torque and bulletproof performance. It was the calm before the storm, and without the 413, there's no Hemi legacy. Coming in 3rd, the Australian 265 Hemi 6. You want underappreciated? Try building one of the most impressive 6-cylinder engines of its time, and never getting it sold in America. That's what happened with this beast. Chrysler Australia took the Slant 6 concept and evolved it into something wild. Inline 6, hemispherical heads, and enough power to make American V8s sweat. Drop it into a lightweight Valiant Charger, and you had a street weapon. In fact, the 265 Hemi 6 was so quick, Ford and GM tried to block it from racing. No joke. It wasn't a V8, but it had the heart of one, and it still holds a special place in Aussie muscle history. Now, 2nd place, the 340 LA small block. This one stings because it absolutely deserved to be a legend. The 340 was introduced in the late 60s as Chrysler's high-performance small block, and it delivered. Lightweight, high-revving, and surprisingly efficient, the 340 could hang with, and sometimes beat, bigger V8s, especially when you threw on the 6-pack intake in the 1970 AAR CUDA or TA Challenger. These things screamed. They were quick, nimble, and flat-out mean, but the 340 never got the love it deserved, thanks to the muscle car crash, rising insurance rates, and tightening emissions. It vanished too soon, but anyone who drove one remembers, and they'll never forget how much it punched above its weight. And finally, 1st place, the most underrated Mopar engine of all time, the 198 Slant 6. Wait, what? Yeah, the little brother of the 225, the engine nobody ever talks about. But here's the truth. The 198 was a gem. It had a shorter stroke, which meant it revved quicker and ran smoother than the bigger Slant. And even though it didn't make huge numbers, it just refused to die. These things were built like iron anvils. They ran cold, stayed simple, and kept chugging through decades of abuse. Mopar used them in darts, Valiants, and a bunch of small rides that needed reliability over flash. And that's exactly why it deserves the top spot, because while everyone else chased horsepower, the 198 chased forever, and most of the time, it won. So there it is, 10 engines that never made the headlines, but made history in their own quiet way. They weren't always the fastest or the loudest, but they kept Mopar moving, and in the world of muscle, that's what really counts. If you've got a soft spot for the underrated, or if one of these sleepers used to sit under your hood, drop it in the comments. We're building this channel on real stories, real engines, and the raw sound of American steel. Hit that like button if you're down for more forgotten legends. Subscribe if you believe real muscle never dies.